Restoration. Where have you heard about restoration before? You probably heard about it when people are talking about restoring houses or restoring their kitchens or just doing anything to make new again. I'm going to be talking about ecological restoration. Ecological restoration aims to recreate, initiate, and accelerate the recovery of an ecosystem that has been disturbed. Ecological restoration is a relatively new science that has not been looked into much before this. The reason that it has become a lot more enticing to look into is because of problems with global warming and lack of biodiversity in most places due to big farming industries. In my speech, I will inform you about restoration ecology, the many ways people use restoration ecology, and how government and the world is involved in programs to help with restoring environments. Restoration ecology, as I said, is a still new and developing field. It covers a wide range of projects, including erosion control, reforestation, removal of non-native species, and habitat environments. In these two images is a restored shoreline from one of my articles. This is what it looked like before, and this is what it looks like after. That erosion over time is what restoration ecologists are looking into trying to stop. They do that with certain plants. As you can see in this image over here, with the roots there, it's keeping the shoreline relatively normal and natural the way it's supposed to be. When talking about farms and rapid switch from small farms to big farms, restoration ecology is needed because large farming industries have wiped out most biodiversity in certain areas. Quote, "This vast land use change has increased the supply of providing ecosystems, services such as food, and reduced regulation and culture ecology services. In fact, landscape transformation due to agriculture expansion and it is the most important driver of biodiversity loss and ecological services decline in the world. Importantly, this could be aggravated by the projected pollution growth for the next decades and is associated with the global food demand." This field is relatively new because we have not faced as big of problems with the ecosystem as we have in recent years. Again, this field of experiment is still new. However, we are still looking into ways to improve our planting methods. How are we going to go about restoring ecosystems? Through many different ways with ecological restoration. The three main ones that I'm going to talk about are soil management, different planting techniques. The three main ones that I'm going to talk about are stock raised nursery cuttings, direct seeding, and planting stock seeds from nurseries. Soil has a great effect on most plants. We always think that plants are just the leafy part up top, but most of the plant is actually the roots that is in the soil. If the soil is not correct or made correctly, then it needs to be fixed. Quote, the ecological engineering guidelines aimed at limiting transit time of different soils. Soil transfer also enables the rapid recreation of habitats corresponding with the reference ecosystem if the donor site is indeed close to one that is originally degraded or destroyed." End quote. This quote is from an article, a comparison of different soil transfers from restoring Mediterranean after pipeline incident. In this process, after the pipeline incident happened where there was a leak, the replacing of the soil is the only thing that let life grow there again. Direct seeding is another way that you can go about ecological restoration. Direct seeding has proven to be not as effective. Quote, "Ranged from 20 to 28 days. However, seeding survival after germination from all species was very low. The highest mortality rate for species occurred during the first rainy season. Overall mortality rate for more species was 100% during the first dry season." End quote. This shows that directly seeding in the new environment is not the best way to go about things. However, it is the most affordable as seen here, because then you don't have to go through the work of putting it in a nursery and dealing with that. Planting stock-raised nursery from seeds is another way. Quote, the trees were approximately 20 centimeters tall when planted, but most grew taller than 1.5 meters after 1.5 years, reaching 2 meters in total height. So in this, what they are doing is they plant the seed in a nursery and take care of it for the first 20 to 28 days of its life until it's actually like a sapling, so then they can plant it in a new environment, and that is shown to be more effective but also a lot more work than just throwing the seeds out in a new open area. And then planting stock-raised nursery from cuttings. They get the cuttings from old trees in the area and they plant them in a nursery. Quote, after planting out disturbed areas, 26% of the second rainy season, the mean survival of saplings across the board was 15.1%. A lot of restoration is not snap and it's fixed science. It's a very hard, you have to put a lot of work in to get it to work. Seedling propagation from cuttings was also fairly slow. This one is a good way to not have to pay for seeds, however, it is a lot more work and time consuming to try to get more plants to grow. These statistical overviews just show that what the most effective planting method is and compared to the cost. The cost is a big problem when looking at ecological restoration, and that is why a lot of ecological restoration is tied to government programs and other nonprofit groups. In 1970, Nixon proposed the establishment of the Environmental Protection Act, the EPA. Restoration ecology is becoming something that they deal with daily. Jennifer Weeks writes, finding the activities that are causing natural resource degradation, so they monitor it closely. In Jennifer Weeks' in her article that I read, she talked about the incident of 2010 where the oil leaked in the Gulf Coast, and here's the dead zone that has spread from that. It is quite vast, as you can see, because it is connected to so many rivers in the area, leading to so many other water sources. In this article, she talks about how the government, if they were to try to help, how expensive it would be. She said, quote, for a full-scale restoration of the Gulf Coast, it would cost 15 to 20 billion over a 30-year period. This means that we cannot just rely on the governments for this because it is very expensive to try to initiate any sort of environmental protection of this size. We also talk about endangered species a lot. Plant endangered species are some of the most endangered species ever. We always focus on animals, not as much as we focus on plants, but the plants actually cause most species to go extinct, at least of herbivores. Tom Arundel in his speech, in his article, talks about how many different groups have identified 25 vulnerable areas in the past that house 40% of the planet species. Now the endangered areas have been upped to 34 regions, and this was back in 2013. These are all my works cited. I cited a few pictures from my articles. Alright. In my speech, I explained the many different ways restoration ecology works and how the government and nonprofit organizations work to help these problems. I hope my speech educated and helped you to understand restoration ecology and the many processes involved in restoring ecosystems. Thank you for listening to my speech.